Some Africans and Westerners has underrated African progress for a very long time. But we have those who still believes in Africa and think Africa is the future. One man who is pioneering this cause is Mr. Jeffrey Sachs. Recently, his video has been circulating online, which he is charging Africans to do more because Africa is the next China. I want us to watch this particular video. I will be back.
Africa could achieve during the next 40-year period essentially what China achieved during the period from 1980 to 2020. China achieved economic growth averaging around 10% per year economic growth. When anything grows at 10%, it means that it doubles in 7 years. So China achieved that growth over 40 years. That means it was doubling essentially in economic size every 7 years. And in a 40-year period, that is 5 doublings, 35 years plus. China achieved about a 35-time increase of output from 1980 to 2020. It went from a country of 1.4 billion people that was very poor in 1980 to either the second or the first largest economy in the world today, depending on how you measure things. My view is that this is possible for Africa and that this should be the aim. And it's actually quite convenient to speak about it now in 2023 because 40 years brings us to 2063, which of course is the birth of a unity of Africa, the Organization of African Unity, which in this great city, in this country, was founded in 1963. And all of Africa's aspirations are dated to the year 2063. I like that because it gives us a 40-year lead time, and development is a long-term process. It's not a short-term process. We should aim for nothing less than 8 to 10% per year compound economic growth over the next 40 years so that African poverty will be a thing of the past and Africa will be solidly a middle-income region of the world and many parts of Africa high income in the world by 2063. Economic development is a very high return activity if you do it right. And if you're lucky to avoid wars and calamities, so you have to stay peaceful. The returns to economic development of a poor region are just about the highest returns on investment of anything in the world. I'd rather invest in Ethiopia's future than in some high-tech company because a high-tech company will not achieve compound interest returns of what Ethiopia can achieve of 15 to 20%. Sonia and I went to China the first time in 1981. At the time, there were no private vehicles on the streets anywhere. There was poverty. There were lots of bicycles already, but there was poverty. And we went in 1981, and we've gone almost every year since then. And you could see the rise of a completely modern, cutting-edge economy in that period. So that's what I believe Africa should aim for and what Africa can achieve. Make a skilled population with solid knowledge, with entrepreneurial capacity, with understanding how to use cutting-edge technology. Give them the tools of ports, fast rail, and all the rest, power and so forth. The business will come. Believe me, there's so many business opportunities in agriculture, in mining, in manufacturing, in tourism, in services, in finance. They're unlimited here. Everywhere you look, you can see business opportunities. but you need the infrastructure and the skilled work. So for me, that's what the government needs absolutely to focus on. My view is that if Africa ensures that by 10 years from now, every child is reaching upper secondary completion, you'll just see this economy take off because the farmers will be innovating. The business startups will be innovating. The service sector will develop. Tourism will soar. And that, to my mind, is the single highest return. I have done some simple calculations looking at how an economic growth model for Ethiopia might suggest the kinds of returns that can be achieved. And there are two basic assumptions that one can look at. So one assumption is about financing, and I call it the high borrowing scenarios, where Ethiopia or an African government has the chance to borrow high quality loans over a maturity of 40 years. Because borrowing short term for development is no good. You borrow for 7 years on the Eurobond market, you go broke in 7 years because you don't get the benefits of development until 20 or 25 years. So the Eurobond market's no good for this unless you're borrowing for 30 or 40-year loans. What you need is official finance for at least a 30-year maturity. The second assumption is whether the fertility rate remains quite high and goes down very gradually, or whether the fertility rate comes down more rapidly through family planning and girls in secondary education and public awareness and so forth. My view is borrow heavily, but 40 years, not short term. Say, don't bother me for 30 years. I've got to get the kids through school. I've got to get them into the labor market. I've got to get the highways built, the rail built, the fiber built. I've got to do all of those things, so don't bother me for 30 years. Then I'll pay you back. If you do that, then this wonderful finance minister can afford to go to the education minister and say, give me a plan for universal completion of upper secondary within the next 5 years. And I want every child to have a tablet, and I want them to have free data. I want them to be online. We're going to give them the best education, and we're going to go out and we're going to tell the business world worldwide, we're going to have the best educated labor force. You come and invest, you're going to reap huge returns. The IMF says, don't worry about it. 2/3 of the kids won't complete high school, but at least you won't have a financial crisis. And I want to say to the IMF, wrong, completely wrong. Every child in Ethiopia is going to complete an upper secondary education, and you, the IMF, are going to go out with this fine finance minister to the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Belt and Road Initiative, to every financial source, to the European Union, to Turkey, to the Gulf, to get 40-year loans so that Ethiopia doesn't remain stuck with slow growth. Or better yet, it's not stuck with slow growth right now, but so that it can sustain a very high growth rate in the future. So that's my pet peeve argument with the IMF. Because they tell poor countries don't borrow. But what they should tell poor countries is don't borrow short term. We have to win the intellectual argument, but then we have to get the financing. And the financing is a little bit tricky because the image of Africa is it's very risky, and people don't understand that this is the highest return potential in the whole world. It is, literally, for the ironic reason that there's more basic investment to do here than any other place, and the returns are astoundingly high. I want to see within the next 10 years, every child understood you're going to complete upper secondary, grade 12 minimum. And if you pass exams at that point, you're going to higher education on the government's tab. Because this is the basis of all development. Nothing is more important than that. Agriculture, mining, manufacturing, tourism, culture, everything is here. This is a most magnificent and beautiful country. It's got everything. It's got nature, every ecosystem. It's got ancient history. It's got modern development. It's got tourism. You name it, it's here. And it's got history that goes back 3,000 years. It's incredible what you find in this country. So for tourism, it is unbelievable. You know, there's so many difficult regions in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, in the Sahel, but they're all trapped in poverty right now. They all need the boost to get out of the syndrome of poverty. They all need a lot more investment. And they need regional investment strategies that would connect Ethiopia with South Sudan, with Kenya, with Eritrea, with Somalia, with Somaliland, because you build a regional economy this way. And that will also reduce risks and help each of the neighboring countries also to develop a deeper strategy. And each region and the AU as a whole needs to build out its partnerships with other regions. So Africa as a whole needs strong relations with the Gulf countries, for sure, with Turkey, with Russia, with China, with Japan, with Korea, with the United States, with the European Union. And all of this is possible right now. The Gulf, I just came from Dubai, their sovereign wealth funds have trillions of dollars. They want food security. You are their food security. There's no limit to the investments they'll bring. So this is another part of the regional strategy that I think is so important. Of course, we need global cooperation. We need peace on this planet. That would be the first most important thing. I testified in the UN Security Council a couple of weeks ago. My point was, for all the wars we have right now, they could be stopped immediately because they're about politics. They're not about some intrinsic underlying urge for war. They're about politics. So politics can find political solutions. And diplomacy is absolutely the cheapest possible investment with the highest returns, even higher than education, because there's nothing more destructive than war. It's absolutely the worst single investment in the world, not to mention the fact that the world spends $2.5 trillion a year on armaments, and the United States alone 40% of that, which is absurd. Why does any country need to spend $1 trillion on armaments in this world? All you do is build up armies that want to go fight someplace. And so it's absolutely ridiculous. One of my fervent hopes that I worked on for a number of years was to help the African Union to become the G20 first country. As you know, now the AU has joined the G21. Don't ever call it the G20 again, please. It has African Union, it's now the G21. So we also have to get the message right. But the African Union has joined the G21, and that gives us the chance to negotiate a new global financial architecture, to negotiate a new debt sustainability framework of the IMF and the World Bank, to capitalize the regional institutions. For example, the African Development Bank should be about 20 times larger than it is. Do you know the total lending of the African Development Bank is about $5 billion a year? for 1.4 billion people. That's a little more than $3 per person in Africa. That's not good enough. Let me just end here by saying it's not only rhetoric, it is actually very deeply held, my deeply held view that these next 40 years will be Africa's years. This will be a period of tremendous development. Soon, and I think it is soon, within the coming decade, everyone will want to rush here because this will be the fastest growing part of the world economy. When they rush here, I want them to find that dynamic, skilled, young workforce that's ready with the ideas, the skills, the ability to implement advanced technologies. And if those pieces can be put together, this will be a glorious period.
Even though sometimes people make some comment like they don't want foreigners to intervene or interfere with our African affairs, I think Mr. Jeffrey Sachs has been the good friends of Africa for a very long time. I have listened to a couple of his videos where he's spitting facts about Africa, and he's always trying to empower Africans to do more to be able to progress. Let me put it in that simple way. And what he has said is not new. It has been said by others, but for him to also advocate for whatever he's advocating for is a very good initiative where he wants Africans to strategize our economy. We shouldn't be taking short-term loans. We shouldn't be taking short-term loans. We are supposed to go for loans that will allow us 40 years before we can start paying that loan. Because if we are always going for short-term loans, we are going to lag behind. And what I've realized is the untruthful nature and corrupt nature of some of our leaders. They are always going for short-term loans because most of them political systems have only 2 terms. So if he's going to take loan, which most African leaders, sometimes they go for loan and they pocket some, they put some in their pockets, and later they tells you we use it to do this, we use it to do that. So they know if they are going for long-term loan. So they know if they are going for long-term loan, it's not going to benefit them. You get it? So they are always going for short-term loan. So what the man is suggesting is the right way, but will our leaders listen to what this man is saying? We don't have to always think with our stomach, or we don't have to always think whilst we are also considering our pockets. We have to think for the future. We have to build a foundation so that whoever is coming, like right now, if most Africans should have decided, okay, let's invest in electricity for us to have stable electricity so that we are not going to have any light outs. We are not going to experience any load shedding. We are not going to, if we were supposed to use our brains and do this particular thing and decide, okay, let's fix our electricity system. So if you are going for loan, we are going for loan to make sure we are coming to fix our electricity system for us not to experience any light outs or load shedding again. And with only stable electricity, do you know how many employment you are going to create for the citizens? I heard that China was, the poverty in China was more than what is happening in Africa. But they stood up one day and decided, no, we can't live like this. We have to change our future. And China took the bold decision to take that decision, which has reflected today. They took it like 40 years ago, and now look at what the result has brought to China. China is completely developed country. But what are we seeing? With all our mineral resources, we are still complaining. We are still, majority of the country are still striving with poverty and a whole lot. All these things this man is saying has already been said by a lot of Pan-Africans, a lot of Africans who meant well for the continent. We have already said it. They have already given ideas how we can develop easily. But our leaders, as we are always saying, most of our leaders are puppets, and they only think of their pocket, not the future of the country they are leading. Please, you can join me on Telegram by going to my description box. Click on the Telegram link. It will take you straight to my Telegram page. Join us for us to talk about the well-being of Africa. If today is your first time joining or watching my content, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification button so that anytime I upload any great content, you will be notified. Thanks for watching.